As soon as Emily stepped into the abandoned mansion, she felt a chill run down her spine. The air was thick with dust, and the silence was deafening. She had been hired to clean up the old place, but something about it seemed off. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and there were cobwebs in every corner. As she made her way through the mansion, she could hear strange noises coming from upstairs. It sounded like someone was whispering in a language she couldn't understand. Emily tried to ignore the sounds and focus on her work, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger with each passing moment. She could feel eyes on her from every corner, and she knew that she was not alone. Suddenly, she heard a loud thud coming from upstairs. It sounded like someone had dropped a heavy object on the floor. Emily cautiously made her way up the creaky staircase, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on her, and she knew that something terrible was about to happen. When she reached the top of the stairs, she saw something that made her blood run cold. There was a figure standing at the end of the hallway, dressed in a tattered cloak and holding a glowing orb in its hand. The figure started moving towards her, its footsteps echoing through the empty mansion. Emily tried to run, but her legs felt like lead. As the figure drew closer, Emily realized that it was not human. Its skin was pale and translucent, and its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. Emily closed her eyes and braced herself for the worst. But when she opened them again, the figure had disappeared. Shaken and terrified, Emily quickly finished her work and left the mansion as fast as she could. She never went back, but the memory of the ghostly figure haunted her dreams for years to come. As soon as Isabel stepped onto the empty subway train, she knew something was wrong. The air felt heavy and suffocating, and there was an eerie silence that made her skin crawl. She sat down in one of the empty seats and tried to shake off the feeling of unease. But as the train started moving, she realized that she was completely alone. There were no other passengers or even a conductor to be seen. Isabel's heart started racing as she realized that she was trapped. The train was hurtling through the dark underground tunnels at a breakneck speed, and she had no idea where it was headed. Suddenly, the train screeched to a halt, and the lights flickered off. Isabel was plunged into total darkness, and she could feel her breathing quickening with fear. Then, she heard a soft whisper in her ear. "Welcome to the Midnight Express," it said. Isabel's blood ran cold as she realized that she was not alone after all. She could feel a presence in the darkness, watching her, waiting for her to make a move. She tried to stand up and find a way off the train, but she stumbled and fell to the ground. As she hit the floor, she felt a cold hand wrap around her ankle. She screamed and kicked frantically, trying to break free, but the hand held on tight, and she could feel herself being dragged towards the end of the train. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on, and Isabel found herself face to face with a sinister figure. It was a man with dark eyes and a twisted smile, holding a knife in his hand. Isabel knew that she had to act fast. She grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher and swung it at the man with all her might. The man stumbled backwards, and Isabel took the opportunity to run towards the front of the train. She found a way off and ran through the deserted subway tunnels, her heart pounding in her chest. When she finally emerged onto the street above, she collapsed onto the sidewalk, gasping for breath. She knew that she had narrowly escaped death, and she vowed never to ride the Midnight Express again. Tessa had always been fascinated by the old lighthouse on the edge of town. It was perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, and it looked like it had been there for centuries. One day, Tessa decided to explore the lighthouse. She had heard rumors that it was haunted, but she didn't believe in ghosts. As she climbed the winding staircase to the top of the lighthouse, She felt a sense of excitement and anticipation. She had always loved exploring old buildings, and this one was particularly intriguing. When she reached the top, she was struck by the breathtaking view. She could see for miles in every direction, and the ocean stretched out before her in an endless expanse of blue. But as Tessa was admiring the view, she heard a strange noise coming from below. It sounded like someone was crying. She cautiously made her way down the staircase, following the sound. When she reached the bottom, she saw a young girl sitting in the corner of the room, her face buried in her hands. Tessa asked the girl if she was okay, but she didn't respond. Tessa was getting a little freaked out, but she didn't want to leave the girl there all alone. She tried to comfort the girl, but she continued to cry uncontrollably. Finally, Tessa decided to take the girl with her and try to find out what was wrong. As they left the lighthouse and walked back into town, Tessa noticed that the girl was wearing old-fashioned clothing. She realized that the girl might have been a ghost, but she didn't feel scared anymore. When they reached the town library, Tessa started researching the history of the lighthouse. She discovered that a young girl had died there many years ago, and her spirit was said to haunt the lighthouse to this day. Tessa knew that she had to help the girl find peace. She went back to the lighthouse and called out to the girl, telling her that she knew what had happened to her and that it was time to move on. Slowly but surely, the girl's ghostly form began to fade away. Tessa felt a sense of relief wash over her as the ghostly girl disappeared into the ether. From that day on, Tessa felt a newfound respect for the old lighthouse. She knew that it was a place of great history and mystery, and she vowed to always honor the spirits that still lingered there. The old abandoned mansion on the hill was rumored to be haunted. No one had lived there for decades, and the locals whispered about strange noises and ghostly apparitions. But one day, a young couple named Emma and Jack decided to explore the mansion for themselves. They were thrill seekers and loved a good scare, so they figured it would be fun to investigate the old mansion. As they approached the mansion, they were struck by how ominous it looked. The windows were boarded up, and vines had grown up the sides of the walls. It looked like it had been untouched for years. Emma and Jack cautiously entered the mansion, their flashlights illuminating the dark and dusty rooms. As they explored the first floor, they didn't find anything particularly unusual. But as they climbed the stairs to the second floor, they heard a strange noise coming from one of the rooms. It sounded like someone was whispering. The couple slowly made their way towards the source of the noise. When they entered the room, they were shocked to see a young girl sitting in the corner. She was dressed in old-fashioned clothing, and her eyes were wide with fear. She told them that she had been trapped in the mansion for years and couldn't escape. Emma and Jack were stunned. They didn't believe in ghosts, but there was no other explanation for what they were seeing. The young girl led them through the mansion, showing them secret passageways and hidden rooms. They soon realized that the mansion was much bigger than they had initially thought. As they explored, they found evidence of other people who had been trapped there over the years. They found old journals and letters, all detailing their desperate attempts to escape the mansion. Emma and Jack knew that they had to find a way to help the trapped spirits escape. They scoured the mansion, looking for clues on how to break the curse that had trapped them all there. Finally, they found a hidden room that contained a strange amulet. It was covered in mysterious symbols, but Emma recognized them from her studies of ancient mythology. She realized that the amulet had the power to break the curse that had trapped the spirits in the mansion. Emma and Jack used the amulet to break the curse, and the trapped spirits were finally able to move on. As they left the mansion, Emma and Jack knew that they had done something truly extraordinary. They had not only proven that ghosts were real, but they had also helped dozens of trapped spirits find peace at last. In a world where magic was outlawed, there was a young girl named Luna who possessed a rare gift. She could see the future in her dreams, and her visions were always accurate. One night, Luna had a dream that shook her to the core. She saw a great darkness descending upon the land, swallowing up everything in its path. She knew that it was a warning of a great danger that was yet to come. The next day, Luna decided to leave her small village and travel to the capital city to warn the king. She knew that her gift was illegal, but she was willing to risk everything to save her people. As she journeyed through the countryside, Luna could feel the eyes of the law watching her every move. She knew that she was in grave danger, but she pressed on, driven by a desire to protect her homeland. When she finally arrived in the capital city, she was met with resistance at every turn. The guards turned her away at the gates, and the citizens jeered at her as she walked through the streets. But Luna refused to give up. She knew that her gift was real, and that she had to find a way to get her message to the king. With a heavy heart, Luna retreated to a nearby tavern to gather her thoughts. But as she sat alone in the corner, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned around, and was met with the gaze of a mysterious stranger. He was tall and handsome, with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. The stranger told Luna that he knew of a gift, and that he could help her reach the king. But he warned her that the journey would be dangerous, and that they would need to move quickly. Luna hesitated for a moment, unsure of whether she could trust this stranger. But something in his eyes told her that he was telling the truth. Together, they set out on a perilous journey through the wilderness, facing countless dangers along the way. But Luna was determined to see her vision come to pass, and the stranger was determined to help her. In the end, they reached the king, and Luna was able to warn him of the danger that was coming. The king, realizing the gravity of the situation, lifted the ban on magic and allowed Luna to use the gift to help save the kingdom. And as the darkness descended upon the land, Luna was able to use her gift to guide the king's armies to victory, saving her people from certain destruction. From that day forward, she was hailed as a hero, and her gift was celebrated as a powerful force for good in the land. In a small village nestled deep in the forest, there was a legend of a creature that stalked the woods. The villagers called it the Shadow Beast, for it was said to lurk in the shadows and strike without warning. One day, a group of travelers passed through the village, seeking shelter for the night. The villagers warned them of the Shadow Beast, and advised them to stay inside after dark. But the travelers were not afraid. They were seasoned adventurers, and they had faced many dangers on their journey. They scoffed at the villagers' warnings, and decided to set up camp in the heart of the forest. As night fell, the travelers sat around their campfire, regaling each other with tales of their adventures. But as the night wore on, they began to feel a sense of unease. They could hear strange noises in the distance, and the trees seemed to be closing in on them. Suddenly, they caught sight of a pair of glowing eyes in the darkness. The eyes were like pools of liquid fire, and they seemed to be staring right at them. With a shiver, the travelers realized that the Shadow Beast had found them. They scrambled to their feet, drawing their weapons and preparing to face the creature. But the Shadow Beast was like nothing they had ever faced before. It moved with lightning speed, striking from the shadows and disappearing into the night. It was impossible to tell where it would strike next, and the travelers were forced to constantly be on their guard. As the night wore on, the travelers grew more and more exhausted. They had not slept in days, and their bodies were beginning to give out. But the Shadow Beast showed no mercy, relentlessly stalking them through the woods. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, the travelers caught sight of a strange, glowing object in the distance. As they approached it, they realized that it was a magical talisman that had the power to banish the shadow beast. With trembling hands, they activated the talisman, unleashing a burst of light that lit up the forest. And just like that, the shadow beast was gone, vanishing into the night. The travelers never forgot their encounter with the shadow beast, and they knew that they had come face to face with a creature that was far beyond their understanding. They left the village the next day, their hearts heavy with the weight of the unknown. In a small town in the middle of the desert, there was a mysterious carnival that appeared every year on the same day. The carnival was known for its strange and eerie attractions, and many believed that it was run by dark forces. One year, a young girl named Sarah stumbled upon the carnival while wandering through the desert. She was intrigued by the colorful tents and flashing lights, and decided to investigate. As she made her way through the carnival, she was drawn to a tent that was draped in black velvet. The tent was unlike any of the others, and seemed to exude an otherworldly energy. As she stepped inside the tent, she was met with a sight that chilled her to the bone. There, in the center of the room, was a crystal ball that seemed to glow with an ethereal light. And sitting behind the crystal ball was a woman with eyes as black as coal. The woman beckoned to Sarah, and as she approached the crystal ball, she felt a strange energy wash over her. Suddenly, she was transported into a world unlike any she had ever seen. The world was dark and eerie, with twisted trees and eerie shadows lurking in every corner. Sarah felt a sense of dread wash over her, as if she was no longer in control of her own fate. As she wandered through the twisted world, she came across a group of people who were trapped in an endless nightmare. They begged her to help them escape, but she was powerless to do so. Suddenly, she heard a faint whispering sound that seemed to be coming from the darkness. She turned around, and saw a figure looming in the shadows. The figure was tall and skeletal, with long, bony fingers that seemed to stretch out towards her. With a scream, Sarah woke up back in the tent, her heart pounding with fear. The woman behind the crystal ball smiled at her, as if she knew something that Sarah did not. From that day forward, Sarah was haunted by the memory of the twisted world she had seen, and the skeletal figure that had lurked in the shadows. She knew that the carnival was not of this world, and that she had stumbled upon something far more sinister than she had ever imagined. In the middle of the ocean, there was a small, uninhabited island that was said to be cursed. Legend had it that anyone who set foot on the island would be plagued by strange nightmares and haunted by the ghosts of those who had died there. One day, a group of sailors found themselves stranded in the middle of a storm, their ship wrecked and adrift. As they struggled to stay afloat, they caught sight of the cursed island in the distance. Desperate for shelter, they made their way towards the island, hoping to find refuge from the storm. As they set foot on the island, they were met with an eerie silence. The air was thick with mist and the trees rustled ominously in the wind. The sailors quickly made their way to the center of the island, where they found an old, abandoned lighthouse. As they took shelter inside the lighthouse, they began to feel a sense of foreboding. The walls were covered in strange symbols and the air was filled with the stench of decay. Suddenly, they heard a faint whispering sound that seemed to be coming from the top of the lighthouse. As they made their way up the winding staircase, they felt the temperature drop with each step. The air grew colder and the mist grew thicker, until they could barely see their own hands in front of their faces. When they reached the top of the lighthouse, they were met with a sight that chilled them to the bone. There, in the center of the room, was an old gramophone that was playing a haunting melody, but there was no one there to operate it. Suddenly, the gramophone began to emit a low, guttural growl, and the sailors realized that they were not alone in the lighthouse. They could feel the malevolent energy of the cursed island all around them, and they knew that they had made a grave mistake. In a moment of desperation, they tried to flee the lighthouse, but the door was locked from the outside. Trapped in the haunted lighthouse, they were tormented by visions of the ghosts that haunted the island. They could hear their moans and cries, and they could feel their icy breath on their necks. Days passed, and the sailors were never seen or heard from again. Some say that they were consumed by the curse of the island, while others believe that they were dragged into the depths of the ocean by the vengeful spirits that haunted the cursed land. In a small town nestled deep in the mountains, there was a house that everyone knew to stay away from. The house was old and dilapidated, with a crumbling roof and broken windows. It had been abandoned for years, ever since the disappearance of the family that had lived there. One day, a group of curious teenagers decided to explore the abandoned house. They had heard stories about strange noises and unexplained occurrences, and they were eager to see if the rumors were true. As they made their way through the creaky old house, they began to feel a sense of unease. The air was thick with dust and cobwebs, and the floorboards creaked under their feet. Suddenly, they heard a faint whispering sound that seemed to be coming from one of the upstairs bedrooms. The teenagers cautiously made their way up the stairs, their hearts pounding with fear. As they entered the bedroom, they were met with an eerie sight. The room was completely empty except for a single, ancient-looking mirror that stood against the far wall. As they approached the mirror, they saw their own reflections staring back at them. But as they looked closer, they noticed that their reflections were distorted, as if the mirror was showing them a different version of themselves. Suddenly, one of the teenagers screamed in terror as the reflection reached out of the mirror and grabbed them by the arm. The other teenagers tried to pull their friend away, but the reflection was too strong. It began to pull the teenager towards the mirror, as if trying to drag them into some otherworldly realm. In a moment of desperation, one of the teenagers grabbed a nearby baseball bat and swung it at the mirror, shattering it into a million pieces. As the shards of glass rained down around them, the reflection released its grip and vanished back into the mirror's shattered remains. The teenagers ran from the house, their hearts racing with fear. As they looked back at the shattered mirror, they realized that they had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. From that day forward, the abandoned house was left untouched, a silent reminder of the horrors that lay within its walls. Deep in the heart of the forest, where the trees were so dense that sunlight barely filtered through the leaves, there was a clearing that few dared to enter. Legend had it that the clearing was cursed, haunted by a vengeful spirit that roamed the woods at night. One evening, a group of teenagers decided to venture into the clearing, thinking it would be a thrill to explore a place that was said to be so dangerous. As they walked deeper into the forest, they began to feel an eerie presence around them. The air grew colder, and the leaves rustled ominously in the wind. Suddenly, they stumbled upon an old abandoned cabin in the middle of the clearing. It was decrepit and run down, with boarded-up windows and a crooked chimney. Despite feeling a sense of foreboding, the group decided to investigate the cabin, thinking they might find something interesting inside. As they entered the cabin, they were met with a foul stench that made them gag. It smelled like rotting flesh and decay. They soon realized that they were not alone in the cabin. There, in the corner of the room, was a pile of bones and a tattered old book. The book was bound in human skin and had strange, arcane symbols etched onto the cover. The pages inside were filled with illegible scribbles and drawings of grotesque creatures. The group could feel the malevolent energy emanating from the book, and they knew they had made a grave mistake. As they tried to leave the cabin, they found that the door had been locked from the outside. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped, with no way to escape the cursed cabin. Suddenly, they heard a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the forest, and they knew that they were not alone in the cabin after all. As the night went on, the teenagers were tormented by visions of the vengeful spirit that haunted the clearing. They could feel its icy breath on their necks, and they could hear its sinister whispers in their ears. They knew that they were not going to make it out alive. In the morning, when the forest rangers found the abandoned cabin, there was no sign of the teenagers. The only thing that remained was the tattered old book, still bound in human skin, and stained with the blood of those who had dared to enter the cursed clearing.